All right, what's going on, everyone? So today we've got some exclusive footage showing the perspective of Ukrainian soldiers infilling and exfilling near the front. And it gives you an idea of just how absolutely terrifying that process must be. We've got a Russian mill blogger getting concerned about the increasing losses of their soldiers at the front, battlefield updates across the south and east, and stick around to the end of today's video. We've got another delivery of a vehicle that you all helped fundraise to soldiers in Ukraine. Now, starting out, I'm going to play this first video. This is the 104th Territorial Defense Brigade using a vehicle from Cars for Ukraine to pick up some of their buddies right near the front. Here we go.
Сука! ПТМ-ка. Блядь! Залазьте, мужики! Давай, все залазь! Все, блядь! Все залазь! Де Васик? Сідайте, які рюкзаки, давайте, братва! Сатана, залазь, блядь! Давай нахуй то все, блядь, в пизду! Повар, держись! От злому зад! Я вперед! Я контролю праву сторону!
All right, so pretty wild, right? I mean, that really gets the heart rate up to see what these guys are going through. And a couple of things I wanted to point out. First off, that is one of the vehicles provided by Cars for Ukraine. So like a donor-provided vehicle. All right, it's not one that we've provided through this campaign, but this went to the 104th Territorial Defense like 6-9 months ago, and they're still putting it to use. So couple things I wanted to call out in the video. First off, this thing sitting on the top of the vehicle, electronic warfare suite under there. So this is jammers to prevent Russian drones from being able to target the vehicle as it approaches. As you move through, you can see we do have some netting right at the beginning. That's the remnants of netting that went over both of these roads at some point. As you get closer to the line of contact, that stuff just doesn't exist anymore, right? And you can see it here. It was there, got hit by enough drones, no longer functions like it's supposed to. But you can see the number of vehicles and everything from cars to pickup trucks to vans to armored personnel carriers right here on the side. That even looks a little bit like a tank. Everything is getting destroyed on this road. So key infill and exfil routes. We don't know exactly where this spot was. I'm sure somebody would be able to geolocate it if need be. So it's not that level of sensitive, but these guys we do know are operating in Donetsk right now. So they move into this, destroyed gas station and quickly pile up. How many did they end up getting in here? Did you think? Was it 5 or 6 into the back of a pickup truck? Let's give that a quick play and see how many actually pile in. So 2 already in the back. 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm counting 8 guys that load up in the back or on to drive out of there. So think about how fast this thing is going right now, right? And when you're watching this exfil, it's not a clean road, right? There's potholes everywhere. There's scraps everywhere. You never know where along this road. Let me pause it real quick. Where is the waiter drone sitting along the side, right? So the waiter drones are ones that Russia and Ukraine are both using this tactic now where they fly a drone forward and they land it. So while the soldiers are looking above or listening for a drone, that waiter drone is on the ground, waits for a vehicle to pass by, and then pops up and strikes. So for these guys, in this chaos, moving this fast, just take a look at the road. How would you even see one of those drones sitting off the side here? In and out so fast. Now, something else to keep in mind when looking at this clip is these guys, if they weren't in this vehicle, of course, they would prefer an up-armored vehicle like an APC. There's not a lot of those, and especially given the rate that these are being destroyed. But if they weren't in this vehicle, they'd be walking, all right? that is how important things like pickup trucks and cars are, and these fundraising efforts that we've been doing to try to help organizations like the 104th with more vehicles. And to that end, we're in the middle of a campaign right now. Stick around to the end of today's video. We've got another delivery of one of these vehicles to the Seraphims. It's a drone unit in the 104th Territorial Defense Brigade, currently fighting in the East. This year, we're outfitting their entire battalion with a set of trucks. So we raised about 130,000 euros a couple months ago. We're back to the second phase of this campaign, working with two different units. So 1st Battalion, 8th Special Purpose Regiment, SSO, and then also the Seraphim. So this one, number of patches, number of videos. There's the video we just watched. So if you want to see it in its entirety, it's at the link in the description below where this fundraiser is. And the Car for Ukraine people actually translated the little bit of yelling translation that happened in there that is done by the Car for Ukraine team. So for those interested in able and contributing to these vehicles that are actively saving lives in the battlefield today, be sure to check out that campaign. Now, shifting over to a pretty interesting assessment here from a Russian mill blogger, Romanov. It's kind of one of the first admissions from the Russian side of the loss rate that Russian soldiers are experiencing. He said, quote, "Now when we find ourselves in a situation where Ukrainians are killing more than 30,000 Russians per month and the Russians cannot replenish their army, we are approaching the moment when mobilization may be required from Russia, and I think this will create problems." He talks about how Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson, said there is no topic, that topic of mobilization is not on the agenda. Romanov says the difference between the reports on control over the sky and the real situation on the ground is measured in the lives of our soldiers. And if the situation is not reversed now, the consequences will become very sensitive and severe already this year. Now, I get asked a lot questions around when will the Russian army, or what is the point in which the Russian army would collapse? And this is an important question in this conflict, looking in both directions. What is the thing, given that it is effectively a stalemate? There's not a lot of movement on either side of the front. What is it going to take for either Russia or Ukraine to capitulate? My answer has long been that I thought the losses that Russia experienced 1, 2, 3 years ago would have been enough for that country to say, for the citizens to say, are you kidding me? No, this has to stop. So I'm out of my depth with the 30,000 plus a month. I thought that in total would have been enough for a country, a modern country in 2026 to say, are we really doing this? But clearly we're not there. What Romanov is getting at is something that could tip that balance. The mobilization of the Russian population. It hasn't really happened. They did have 2 waves of mobilization at the beginning of the conflict. A lot of those guys are still in uniform, the ones that are still alive, and they have been used at the front pretty regularly, like just as consistently as contract soldiers. If Ukraine continues at this pace, this 30+ thousand a month, that means they are killing more Russians each month than Russia is able to pull into the service. So the Russian army, in effect, is shrinking month by month. They cannot continue the war if their army is shrinking. That opens up the question of mobilization. There are still some other steps that Russia can take, increasing the death benefit to soldiers or increasing the compensation to soldiers, maybe trying to import more soldiers from abroad where they trick them, think they're coming in to work in a field or something, and they find themselves in a assault at the zero line. So there are still some other ways that Russia can try to build out their forces, but this is a bit of an indication that it might be trending in that direction if Ukraine can keep this pressure up, which is a crazy amount, right? To be able to kill or significantly wound 30,000 people a month every month in perpetuity is wild to be able to keep up that pace. But if they can, there are little indications that this might be a step in the direction of the Russian military actually having some trouble with keeping this up. Now, shifting over to some battlefield updates here, we are going to go to the map. I always think that's useful, but I want to share with you guys an incredible resource. This is Rob Lee and Dmitro Putiata. My apologies in pronunciation there. Rob, U.S. Marine, living in Ukraine now, excellent analyst on the conflict. And Dmitro, I believe, is a former Ukrainian Marine. They put together this analysis on Substack that I'll have in the description below, and they just did a great roll-up. We're working on getting these guys on the channel for an interview to talk through all of this, but their first article they put out was a battlefield update for March of 2026. It's hard to stress how much of an expert in the field these two are together. So be sure to check this out. I want to just pull directly from this and run through it in the video. It's that detailed and that high quality. I'm going to hold off because I do think we're going to get the guys on the channel to talk through their work, and I think that would be a much better use of our time. But turning over to Deep State Map with some kind of high-level analysis here from Deep State and then from Russian media Rybar, starting out with Deep State, talking about the overall battlefield situation. They said in March, the Russians occupied 27% more territory than in February. So an increase in Russian territorial gains in March compared with Russian territorial gains in February is what they're saying. They say the most assaults traditionally occur in the Pokrovsk sector, Konstantinovka, and Huliopol. Together, those three sectors account for 2/3 of all Russian assaults. They say the greatest advances occur in the Huliopoli sector. So zooming in here, this is the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, right here. So this is where the most Russian attacks in the month of March took place. They say 24% of all Russian assaults were here in the month of March. Gives you an idea of how important the Zaporizhzhia direction is right now to the Russian military. They say next comes Sloviansk and Pokrovsk. The first sector is declining. They said attacks in Pokrovsk are decreasing significantly. But they do note there are also problems in the Kursk sector, which includes the border region of Sumy. And this is up north, and we haven't talked about this very much in quite a while because it's largely been pretty stagnant. But they say in this Sumy direction, like the other end of the country here, they say there have been some problems recently. 13% of all territorial losses in the month of March actually happened in Sumy, despite a relatively small number of Russian assaults. We might have to start paying a little more attention to the situation up north. Now, to contextualize this, Deep State says if the current pace of advancement continues, we should go back down here to the Donetsk region. We'll zoom out just a little bit. So this chunk right here, the rest of Donetsk, is, of course, a key for the Russian military and something they very much want to have. Deep State says if the current pace of advancement continues, that has happened for the first 3 months of this year, Russia will be able to occupy Donetsk by December of 2029. So a short more 3.5 years at this pace before Russia is able to take the rest of Donetsk, let alone the rest of the country. They say, for example, to achieve this goal, if they wanted to take Donetsk by the end of 2026, they would need to occupy more than 600 square kilometers of Donetsk every single month. Again, they took 160 square kilometers across the entire country in March. So it would require a substantial uptick in attacks, substantial uptick in successful attacks and assaults for Russia to see significant progress here. But I do want to stress the last few months, we have seen slow but steady progress by Russia in the Konstantinivka direction. This is essentially like it is almost impossible for Ukraine to get in and out. It is impossible for Ukraine to get in and out of Konstantinivka unharassed at this point. So we know that this road moving from Drushkivka down to Konstantinivka is heavily hit with Russian drones. So infil, exfil, getting casualties out, getting supplies in, this is turning into another pocket right now. That's a concern because that moves up towards Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, and we have seen in recent weeks a continued advance. And look, these are major hubs in the east, kind of the last major hubs for Ukraine in the east. So every 100 meters that Russia is able to advance towards those is a problem. It was a problem when they first started making that move years ago. It's a problem right now. So while Russia is moving very slowly, they are continuing to advance, albeit at a very heavy cost, in this key direction of Konstantinivka, Drushivka, Kramatorsk, and Sloviansk. Now, turning over to the Zaporizhzhia direction, I want to look at some Russian sources here, talking about things from their perspective. Russian media Rybar is actually talking about the western sector. They say in the West Zaporizhzhia direction, we'll zoom in here, too far, we'll zoom in here. They say the situation for Russia continues to deteriorate. Despite Russian counterattacks attempts in Primorsk, Ukrainian forces continue to demonstrate high activities in adjacent sectors. Footage revealed that Russian armed forces lost control over, let me make sure I get these areas right here. These are the fake Russian reports, right? So they say Russia has now lost control over Novokalivka here. Like, I don't know that there was like one Russian source at one point that said they had that. There were no reliable Russian sources saying that this was held by Russian forces, but now Rybar is having to say, well, actually, we don't hold that territory. They said this is definitely under Ukrainian control. They added that Pavlivka is also now back under Ukrainian control. Again, I don't know that it was ever controlled by the Russians, and they say that for a number of different settlements up here. In fact, at the end of Rybar's assessment, they complain and say, hey, how is Ukraine able to advance from the north up here if we actually hold Rikny and Velsilanka here, these two villages? They don't. They haven't. That's the answer. So Rybar, in kind of wrapping up the issues in this direction, said Ukraine is continuing to advance in a couple different directions, Stepov, towards Plavny, out of Primorsk. So they are seeing some Ukrainian pressure in this direction. And Rybar adds, overly hasty statements about liberating settlements where only small groups enter or move towards are problematic. Again, the false reports taking towns and cities on credit has been a theme of Russian communications this past year. It looks like it's no different in the Zaporizhzhia direction. And to that end, kind of the poster child for claiming advances when they aren't there, let's shift over to the Kupiansk sector, where we got some interesting ones in just the last couple days, because Russia has started to claim success in the Kupiansk direction. And you'll recall there was a time where this entire area was red. It was held by, or contested and red. And Vladimir Putin came out strangely and said that Russia holds all of Kupiansk, offered to send in international reporters to see for themselves. That would have been interesting had it actually played out. The control over Kupiansk was scattered Russian forces they hadn't reinforced, and they were pretty quickly cut off, and many of them eliminated in a Ukrainian counterattack. Just yesterday, Russia put out a note, and they said, good news has come from the Kupiansk direction. Russian units have achieved notable successes in reducing the bridgehead of Ukrainian formations east of the Oskil. So what they're talking about is a couple areas through here that they say, great news, we have started to push back and try to recapture and open up the territory north of Kupiansk. Again, just for some context here, that is territory that Russia claimed to be fully in control of almost a full year ago. All right, it was last September, October timeframe when Russia said they fully controlled this entire area. So here we are 9 months later, and Russia is celebrating reopening territory that they at one point had, then lost, and they're back fighting over north of Kupiansk. They add positive developments continue or allow cautious optimism. The focus remains on tactical components. Infiltration groups work successfully without revealing their presence. So we are continuing to see a number of changes across the battlefield. Nothing significant. Ukraine is continuing to carry out kind of small-scale counterattacks, very targeted, very deliberate clearance operations in certain areas of the front. Russia seems to be trying to find the best path forward right now. We saw a lot of dismounted assaults over the course of last fall into the winter. We're starting to see more armored assaults right now, but it's not very many and it's not very frequent. So I think we're still waiting to see exactly what the Russian tactic for 2026 and any offensives in this year are actually going to look like. That's probably something we should expect in the next 4 or 5 weeks as the snow is melting, mud season in Ukraine. It's difficult to move across large portions of territory. Russia is likely putting something together. We'll see what that comes to here in the next couple weeks. But all right, before we wrap, quick video, a thank you from the soldiers of the 104th. Getting the vehicles that you provided to their unit keeps them alive day in and day out. And then be sure to check out in the description the link to contribute to that campaign if interested. It's going to be going all year. And then also the analysis by Rob Lee and his buddy, got to get the name right here so I don't butcher it again, Dmitro Putiata. Sorry, Dmitro, I know I got that wrong, man. But incredible analysis by those guys. Great resource. That'll be in the description below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see y'all next time.
Вітаємо! Від імені 4-ї роти безпілотних авіаційних комплексів 2-го батальйону безпілотних систем. Ми дякуємо за це автоорганізації Car for Ukraine та команді Бандеромобіль. Окрема подяка Престону Стюарту та його спільноті. Це завдяки вам. Авто вже працює. Дякуємо за підтримку і слава Україні! Героям слава!